Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out the entire first wave of the Jurassic World Dominion minifigures. As far as this, version goes, we do have those target sets and stuff that we'll go over eventually, but again, these are the regular mainline minis, and we have the entire set here to take a look at. We'll also check out the codes on the underside. So to help you get an idea as far as which dinosaurs are in which sets, you can see this one has the code right there. These are the codes you follow to figure out which ones are included in the packaging. Once I figure out how to open this up, because I'm a little dumbfounded right now. Oh, I get it. There's tape on there. I'm a little bit of a simpleton. I do want to say a huge thank you to my good friend Matthew, who hooked me up with these. Again, he found them in his area before I would ever find them. I actually did find some of them. I found them at Target. They wouldn't let me buy them because, street dates. So straight away, this first one, we've got the Yangshuanasaurus in here, which actually looks incredibly nice, as well as Velociraptor Blue. And I love that these minis now have like smaller sizes to them. You can see they're not all, well, you can kind of see it, but they're not all the exact same size like they used to be. And they're also a really soft kind of bendable rubber, which is not at all how they used to be. That was kind of caught me by surprise a little bit. We also have a booklet inside that probably shows off all the other figures that are in the first wave. You can definitely see which ones we have right here. We have a lot of really cool ones to get through here. The next box that we have here, we have the code right there to show us which ones are included. Again, we have to cut the tape. And then once we go ahead and open this up, we'll pop them out. We'll see who's included in this one. So this one, we've got the T-Rex. Looks sculpt-wise to be pretty much the same T-Rex we had last time, but a very, very different material. I can definitely say that. And then the next one, we've got the code again here on the underside. This one, even though it's really dark, this one is 6. You can see right there, the box is a little bit crushed. So once we pull the crushed stuff out of the packaging, we've got ourselves a Gallimimus, which is so cool to have a Gallimimus now in the minifigure line. And we've also got ourselves the Quetzalcoatlus, which is one that I was really excited to see. Oh, look at the articulation on that. That's pretty nice. Really nice. Look, I love the flexibility of these. And then the next one is, we've got the code right here on the underside. So this one is 5. And then once we open this up, I'll turn it around because I keep, oh, you know what? It was right the first way. So we pull it out, and this time we've got the Lystrasaurus as well as the Therizenosaurus. Really excited to see these ones included. Nah, that is so cool. That might be my favorite one out of the entire set. And again, the Therizenosaurus. Man, these are really, really nicely sculpted. Impressive. I was in love with the original minis from Mattel, but these newer ones might be even nicer than the older ones. And then we have number 3. I obviously am opening these not in the correct order or anything. Pop the tape off there, and then we'll check out who's inside. This time we've got ourselves the Stegosaurus as well as the Atrociraptor, which I believe is Ghost. Nice to see paint out onto the tail. That's not something you see every day, even though it's a minifigure. Then the next one, which is number 8, you can see right there on the underside. If I can figure out which side I cut, now I don't remember. There we go. We'll pull this one out, and this time we've got ourselves a Pteranodon and the Triceratops. I really like the new Triceratops sculpt. That is very nice. And then the Pteranodon looks pretty cool, not amazing, but still fun. And I just kind of dropped him. Now he looks like he died right there before us. Oh, I couldn't get that booklet. And then moving on, we almost have them all out. This one is number 7. So if we pull this out, this time we have the Baryonyx and the Iguanodon. Man, I can't wait for the larger Iguanodon figure. Really beautiful looking Baryonyx with quite possibly the largest, most obnoxious looking feet I've ever seen. And then the Iguanodon. Man, that's nice. That really has me hyped for the larger version coming soon. And funny enough, it seems as though we got the, main dinosaur for Dominion as last. You can see this one is number 2. But we have and I think you probably already know who's in here, the Giganotosaurus. And I couldn't show you that because it was a little bit too high right there, but there is the Giganotosaurus in the minifigures. That is really, really, really nice looking. Again, except for those massive feet. I really wish they would decrease the size of the feet of these figures. But here are all of the minifigures for the new Jurassic World Dominion line when it comes to the first gathering of figures that we have here. And I, again, absolutely love the fact that we have different sizes for these figures. It's so cool to have larger and smaller figures included. And you can see we have a plethora of species here for the first wave of these minis, and quite a lot to get through. So let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at all of these right now. So we're going to begin with the Triceratops, and you can see the Triceratops looks very nice, definitely a new sculpt compared to the older one. One thing straight away that's pretty noticeable is the fact that we don't have neck articulation, and that's definitely something that, again, we had on the older ones. But you can again see as far as detailing goes, it looks great. Pretty much looks like your standard when it comes to a Mattel Triceratops, which means it has very nice detail and also quite beautifully replicates a Jurassic World version of a Triceratops. This one is kind of in a leaning down position, kind of leaning forward, almost looking like it's sort of dueling, maybe with another Triceratops, which I also really do quite like. Definitely, again, some fantastic detailing through the course of the figure with some really nice scale detail, as well as the usual, skin creases, skin wrinkles, and skin stretching and everything like you would like to see. We have some beautiful coloration for this as well with some nice greens. We have a very nice realistic tone of green, a light green for the majority of the body, and then some beautiful browns that design along the back of the Triceratops. And as you can see, we have paint that runs all the way out here onto the tail, not the entire way, but most of the way. And if Mattel can do this for the minis, they can do it for the bigger figures, and look how much of a difference it makes. Of course, we don't have nail paint or anything like that, which is a little bit of a downside, but then again, I don't really expect that on minis because we usually get like fairly basic paint jobs for the minis, but I really think it looks good with the coloration running so far out onto the tail. We do have coloration for the horns, but not the nasal horn for some reason. We have a white coloration for the horns right here. We don't have any coloration for the spikes running along the frill, again, or the nasal horn, nothing for the beak. We do have black for the eyes, which looks pretty good. But definitely a really nice Triceratops. And again, it's a very squishy kind of a feel compared to the older ones, which were a lot harder. Definitely a really nice looking figure. And to show you the differences between this one and an older one, there is the older Triceratops minifigure from Mattel. And you can immediately see that there is a pretty big size difference between the older one and the newer one. Like, actually a lot of difference in size. You can definitely see that the size of the Triceratops has drastically, decreased, but you can see that the sculpt overall looks fairly similar. We can see that we did have paint for the nasal horn on the older one, which definitely was a plus for that figure. But again, it's still a beautiful sculpt, really nice new appearance for the Triceratops, and the fact that it's smaller maybe because, rather than just getting one individual larger figure, we now get some individual figures, but also 2-packs with numerous figures, which might again be part of the reason for the smaller size of this one. We also have Velociraptor Blue, which is incredibly small. You can see that detail-wise, again, it looks pretty good, but it's so small, it's almost hard to make out some of the detail. And due to how small it is, one thing, like you can see the fingers are really quite large, the feet are massive, which they're usually pretty big on the Mattel Minis, but they look really, really big on this one. But again, it's a way smaller version than the older Velociraptor Blues, and the proportions are obviously going to be off quite a bit. I think even more so because of it being smaller. You can see that we do have the blue stripe there running along the side of the raptor, and they did a good job of stopping the blue on this side before it really reaches the eye, although it does end pretty abruptly way before it should out here on the tail. We do have an alternate tone of color for the underside with kind of like a light yellow. The blue does go up and around the eye, but not perfectly over here. The blue is definitely a little bit sloppy. We have a black coloration for the eye, and nothing else really going on color-wise. The sculpt is nice, but it's so small, it's kind of hard to really pick up on how good the detail is compared to any of the previous Velociraptors. And again, a massive size difference between this and the previous version. So to show you that, here is a Velociraptor Blue Mini that I had repainted a long, long time ago, and you can again see the difference is ridiculous between these two. The detailing on the older one, I think, was much nicer than what we see on the newer one just because we had more to look at on the figure as far as the detail goes, but you can really get a good idea of how small the newer one is compared to the older one. Then we've got ourselves a Gallimimus, and this one, although another very small figure, is extremely exciting to me because this is the first time we've had a Gallimimus in the mini line, and you can see that, again, sculpt-wise, it looks fairly similar as far as the detail goes to what we see on the Velociraptor. As like, what I mean is that the detail's a little muted because it's so small. Like, you can't really pick up on just how nice, like, the skin texture is or anything. You can see things like musculature and stuff like that. The Gallimimus overall definitely looks like your standard Mattel Gallimimus, which is a plus because I think their Gallimimus figures look really good, minus the fact that the feet are usually quite large, and you definitely have super-sized feet on this Gallimimus. Potentially the largest feet, I think, as far as proportions go compared to the body on almost any Mattel figure I've seen. You have a nice striping running down the entire body pretty much from the neck area all the way out onto the tail, which looks pretty cool. And we also have a lighter tone of color for the underside of the Gallimimus that unfortunately doesn't run the entire length of the tail, but it still looks really good. And again, as far as a minifigure of a Gallimimus goes, this one is beautiful, I think. Very small, which I also do quite like. And for its size, it does sport some pretty nice paintwork. Of course, the proportions are really off, but it's still a really cool looking, very fun Gallimimus, looking almost, again, Jurassic Parkish as far as the coloration goes. Then we've got ourselves a brand new Stegosaurus, definitely different from the older ones. And I do want to state again that all of these figures are all very bendable, whereas the older ones really were not. Like, you could probably flex them a little bit, but nothing like what these newer ones have as far as just being pretty much rubber. But again, that almost has like a real feel for them, I guess. But you can see this one is fantastic. Definitely larger than I think any of the ones that we've taken a look at so far. And I really love the sculpt of this Stegosaurus. Beautiful, yet again, kind of a leaning forward pose for the Stegosaurus. Maybe it's leaning down to get a bite to eat or a drink or something like that. Fantastic skin texture through the entire course of the figure. Really nice tail out here. You can see that we have some speckling for the figure. We also have basically like an orangish tone for the coloration of the body, and then a nice really smooth transition to a dark brown. And then we have like some off-whites or light yellows that kind of stripe through the plates on the back of the Stegosaurus, and the plates as well look great. Foot sculpts and everything look very nice everywhere you look at them. Again, the speckling's pretty abundant through the course of this figure. The head sculpt also looks fairly nice, and we have a nice black eye for the figure. All of the paintwork of this one actually looks really good, except for the fact that we don't have any paint out onto the tail at all. It really would have been nicer to have some paintwork, because like that dark brown just ends so abruptly. Like, we should have had the plates painted and then a little bit more of that dark brown running out here onto the tail. And then, of course, the thagomizers being painted would have been a huge plus. But even still, this is a really nice looking Stegosaurus. And also, again, very different compared to the older one, which we have the older one right here. One of which, again, that I repainted. But you can really see, again, the differences in the overall sculpting and detailing of the Stegosaurus. They definitely would look cool together, and if they continue to give us different variants of these Stegosaurs, we might have ourselves a Lost World Jurassic Park group or family of Stegosaurs like we saw in that film. Then we have a new species to the line. This is the second one now in this review so far, as we have the Quetzalcoatlus, and this is an absolutely beautiful looking Quetzalcoatlus. You can see the detail looks pretty good for the face, but there's not too much to it. What we can see definitely looks nice, but there's just not as much as I'm used to. But you can see that we have that nice blue there up on the top of the crest of the Quetzalcoatlus, some beautiful oranges that kind of run down there around the eye and out onto the beak. We have the tongue on the inside of the mouth. You can turn the head and neck and everything everywhere because of how flexible this is. Like, it is super, super flexible. As you move down the course of the neck, you can kind of get a pretty good idea of the detail, but again, it's not perfect, being that they're so small, and the minis overall kind of have decreased in size, except for maybe like the Rex and the Giganotosaurus. But detailing, again, does look good for what it is. We have some really nice paintwork out here on the wings. I really like that kind of splotchy brown there and how it plays off of that kind of light tan. It looks really neat, and I love that they've allowed the grayish coloration to continue to run along the outer edge of the wing. And you can see that we do have articulation in the wings, so we can move them up and down. which is really nice to see. We also have that same style of coloration for the underside, and that's really exciting because so many times we often don't get coloration on the underside of our pterosaurs at all when it comes to Mattel releases. So to have some here on this one is really nice. There's actually a hole in the chest, though, almost making it look like there should be like a peg or something to hold the figure up, which if there was, I happen to have missed that in the packaging. But regardless, again, the entire thing looks fantastic sculpt-wise. Paint-wise, it looks really good. Definitely looks like what it looks like in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom as far as I can tell. Again, obviously not perfect due to it being more of a basic version of that paint-wise, but it definitely looks very nice, and it's awesome to have a Quetzalcoatlus entering the line. It's awesome just in general to have a pterosaur that's not a Pteranodon. But speaking of the Pteranodon, we do also have one of those, and this one honestly doesn't look too far off from the older one. Now, I do have one of the older ones here, and you can see there definitely are some differences. Like straight away, you can see that the entire thing is, again, much smaller than the older one, but it doesn't look too far off. We definitely have a different positioning for the head and neck area. The wings are similar, but not exactly the same, and the bodies overall definitely have a very different appearance, but again, as far as they look compared to the older one, definitely a much smaller version. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't have some really nice detail, as we usually do when it comes to a Mattel figure. Like, you can even see the throat in this pterosaur and everything. You can also see some nice detailing there as far as, like, veins and stuff in the skin flaps of the wings. Really nice detail up here on the upper side, not just in the skin flaps of the wings, but also through the course of the body. We have a nice kind of a light brown here in the skin flaps of the wings, a dark brown for the majority of the body, and then you also have some yellow up here in the face running down the crest and out onto the beak. Not too much else going on as far as paintwork or anything that I can really pick up on, but it's definitely a pretty fun Pteranodon, just not one of the most exciting figures in here. And here is the one that, in my opinion, is the most exciting figure, I think, in here, and that is the Lystrasaurus. I cannot believe we have a Lystrasaurus in here. This is unreasonably awesome, and I hope we get a bigger figure of this at some point, because it is a super cool species. And honestly, again, my favorite, I can tell you that straight away, of this entire lineup right here, because it's just such an unexpected species to be included. And the sculpt looks fantastic. Even though it's a really small figure, it is jam-packed with some very nice detail. We also have some nice paintwork, as we have a nice light green with some darker greens that kind of just splotch throughout the entire course of the body. Like, you can see it all the way up here on the top of the head, running all the way out there to the end of the tail. And we also have speckling and everything throughout. We've got black eyes for the animal. You can see the nostrils and everything. It's just an overall gorgeous version of a Lystrasaurus. Definitely my favorite of the minis. I can tell you that completely with confidence, because it is just a really cool species. I don't think I have any of these in my collection at all. So yet again, Mattel entering a new species to my collection, and I'm so happy that it's such a nice one. We've also got another new species entering the line, and we have an Iguanodon, which I know we are getting a larger figure of at some point soon. And I really hope it looks just like this, because the paintwork of this one looks really nice. Again, detail-wise, it looks really good. It is a bit larger than a lot of the other figures we've taken a look at, so we have a better opportunity to really see how nice the detail is. We have kind of like a light white coloration here for the face, which really highlights the detail. You can see the nostrils, the beak, and everything very nicely done. Honestly, all of the detail in that head sculpt is great. You can see creasing moving down the neck, and a really smooth transition from that white coloration to the light green body color of the Iguanodon. And as we continue to move along the figure, you get these nice dark brown stripes and splotches that run through the entire course of the figure. Really nice naturalistic coloration for the animal, and you can see that everything detail-wise on this one is fantastic. If the Lystrasaurus weren't included, I would probably say that this Iguanodon is my favorite of all of these minis, because it is a beautiful dinosaur to have chosen to enter the Mattel line, and they really did do it justice on this figure. I think this one, again, is another top contender as far as the best that this wave of minis has to offer. Definitely a very nicely done figure. Again, like I stated quite a few times, it's very flexible, very bendable, like all of these are. We also have the Therizenosaurus, and this one looks pretty much just like the larger Therizenosaurus looks, and that means that it's extremely nicely done. Like, when it comes to a minifigure, I can definitely tell you this is a very impressive looking one, and we do have articulation in the arms because, you know, it's a Therizenosaurus, why wouldn't we? So it is nice to have that little bit of extra awesomeness with the Therizenosaurus, and the paintwork of this is surprisingly nicely done. We have a yellow eye, which isn't something we've seen on a lot of these minis. You can also see we have a nice green coloration for the face that transitions to a really dark blue, as well as a red streak there running down the back. And again, the light green continues to run through the course of the underside. So we have a few different tones of color for this one, which isn't something that we've seen too much on these figures. We usually seem to have like 2 colors, maybe 3 on a few, but not very many. You can see that we don't have any specific paint for the nails as usual. You would expect that on a Therizenosaurus, even being a mini, but we really don't. But again, detail-wise, it looks great. You can see the nice feather detail through every area of the Therizenosaurus. Very nicely sculpted out feet. Again, big and bulky like they always are when it comes to Mattel, but that's, again, something that's also to be expected. The head sculpt is honestly fantastic. Look at that head sculpt. I feel like they really outdid themselves on this one. You can see some nice creasing there in the neck as well, kind of with the turn of the head right here in the lower part of the neck, showing off that movement in the head. Absolutely awesome looking Therizenosaurus. Then we have the Yangshuanasaurus, which also looks pretty much the same as far as the larger version, which will also be up for review here on the channel very soon. But you can see we also have yellow eyes, or yeah, definitely a yellow. I was thinking maybe they were a green, but you can really see it's a yellow. A little bit misplaced, I will say that, or a little sloppy, but it still looks really good. Detail-wise on this one, again, you can see it is jam-packed with really nice sculpting, really nice skin texture, lots of osteoderms as well. You have a beautiful-looking head sculpt with an articulated jaw, which isn't something we've seen too much in this line. The detailing of the inside of the mouth looks pretty good. You've got a tongue, very nicely sculpted out teeth. You've got some red up there on the crest of the Yangshuanasaurus. And then kind of like some ridges and stuff here running along the back of the dinosaur and then following along the spinal column leading out into the tail. A little bit of a curve for the tail. The brown up here on the back that kind of overtakes the spinal column and then kind of splotches down into the side of the body. Unfortunately does end fairly early into the tail, but it still looks pretty good. We don't really have any coloration for the underside. I will say the feet, although large, obviously, look way better on this one than a lot of the feet have looked on this entire wave of minis. But again, the Yangshuanasaurus is a really nice looking mini, so there's definitely some awesome ones in this set. And this one, again, is really nicely done. The paintwork looks great, too. I really love the tones of color. Nice, naturalistic look for the animal overall. The only downside to this one is the fact that we don't have any kind of, like, painted teeth, and we also don't have very good painted eyes. They're a little bit sloppy, but otherwise a really nice figure. Then we've got ourselves the Pyroraptor, and the Pyroraptor is awesome, except mine seems to have, like, a really warped arm over here, like, it looks broken almost. I don't know if that's how all of them are, or if the arm of mine was just kind of like awkwardly placed in the packaging, but it definitely looks a bit off. You can see we have some red eyes, though, for Ghost, the Atrociraptor, and some beautiful paintwork as we have a nice, again, white coloration with those brown stripes that kind of run through the course of the figure, and they look really nice. Definitely a very appealing look, almost JP3-ish as far as the female Velociraptors go when it comes to their coloration. The detail of this one, again, though, is a little hard to pick up on due to it being so small. It's about the same size as Velociraptor Blue, so it's a really, really small figure, but what we can see definitely looks nice, minus the fact that the arm is very, very awkwardly placed. But overall, an absolutely awesome minifigure for the Atrociraptor as well. I'm really impressed with these minis overall. Then we've got the Baryonyx, which is another brand new sculpt. You can see this one is sculpted with its mouth closed, no articulated jaw whatsoever. We have a little bit of a yellow eye there, and we really only have 2 tones of color for this one, as we have a dark blue on the top and then kind of like a light off-white for the lower side of the Baryonyx, which is a little bit, off as far as how nice it could look. It could have looked a lot better if there were more color to it, but at the same time, it kind of still follows the same trend of what we usually see on a Jurassic World style Baryonyx. The blue does end also very early into the tail. You can see there is a speckling through the course of the figure as well. Super big feet, though. Really awkward looking feet. That's definitely for sure. But I have another mini again here. I have the older Baryonyx, which I feel like honestly is nicer than the newer one. I will definitely say that the older Baryonyx looked a good bit nicer, but I actually like the fact that we have the jaw closed on this one. We don't have an articulated jaw on the newer one. I feel like it definitely looks a little bit nicer because the older one, although nice, looks a little weird in the jaw area. Definitely a little more appealing on this one, but you could really see again that this one is also a good bit smaller than the older one. Now the T-Rex, I think, is actually the same figure entirely. Like, I really can't pick up on any differences, which is pretty shocking. You can see the legs and everything are in the same position. Detail-wise, everything honestly looks the same on the Rex. The only real difference I'm picking up on is the coloration, as we have a nice brown and then a darker brown up here that's almost applied in like a wash-like way, where we can kind of see the other browns creeping through. You can even see from up above that the sculpt really does look pretty much the same. The only difference, again, is the coloration and the fact that it's very, very squishy. Articulated jaw, exactly like we had on the first one. And the final is the Giganotosaurus, and you can definitely see that as far as the sculpt goes, the Giganotosaurus might be one of the nicest of all because the detailing is phenomenal. We have that really nice armored type of a look to the back of the dinosaur leading out the length of the tail. We have the coloration here, that darker green that runs really far out onto the tail. Not the entire way, but pretty darn far. Of course, the proportions are really off on the figure as a whole. You can see the tail's really short. The legs and feet are obviously a bit off. The feet are really big like usual, but as far as the sculpt goes, I really do like the Giganotosaurus. We have a nice light green eye as well. Articulated jaw, which works very smoothly. You can get in there and see the tongue and everything on the inside of the mouth. And again, sculpt-wise, you got really nice detailing throughout. The skin texture looks phenomenal. You kind of have like some slices and scars as you run through the figure overall. You can see some nice wrinkling and creasing in the neck region. Also some kind of like tensing and stuff. The hands look fairly good, but a little muted, I think, detail-wise. And the feet have some nice scoots down the toes. You've also got kind of like a speckling on this one, but it's not as abundant as we've seen on a lot of others. No coloration for the underside at all, but definitely the biggest one, I would say, out of all of these minis is the Giganotosaurus, and definitely one of the most impressive because the sculpt is just overloaded with beautiful detail, and although the proportions are definitely off, I really do feel like this is one of the best out of the entire wave. So, definitely a pretty lengthy line of minis, that is for sure. We have a lot of really cool ones this time around. I am not going to measure every minifigure, that's just not in the cards. There's so many, we'd be here all day. I'm going to kind of run the tape measurer here over top to give you an idea of the size of, the figures. Like the Pyroraptor here is really small. You're looking at about 2 inches or 5 centimeters in length. So what I'll basically do is just give you a size comparison. I feel like that would probably help a little bit better. And the first thing I'm going to do is just bring in a few of the older Mattel minis to just kind of put in here with these figures and to help to give you, again, a rough idea of the size. You can see that the majority of them aren't too far off. Obviously, they've decreased the sizes of some of the figures compared to the previous releases, but as a whole, they still kind of fall in that same size range as the previous minis. But the only difference is, prior to this, the minis were kind of all sized in one basic, area sort of size range. Like, they didn't trail too far off from each other in the size department, but now we have a lot of different sizes here. Pretty much every figure, I would say, is a different size from the other, so that is definitely no longer the case with these newer ones. The newer ones have all their own individual sizes and no longer follow that same trend of all being the same size. And then for your standard size comparison, there is Mr. Papo Rex, the Attack Pack Gallimimus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to the minis here in comparison. Again, you can really see a massive size difference between the minis and these other figures right here. I don't really feel like there's too many other comparisons we can really make to give you an idea of the size. So if you happen to have either of these figures or even the older minis, you should hopefully know that these are definitely quite small. So I really am a pretty darn big fan of these new minis. I really like them as a whole. I think the sculpts are fantastic. Not quite as highly detailed on some as what we've had on the older ones, but I think that might also, again, be due to the size differences because a lot of the newer ones are a bit smaller than the older ones. But I really feel like Mattel did a great job as a whole on all of them. The only one that I feel like is a little bit lazy would be the T-Rex, because rather than giving us a new sculpt like they did with so many others, they just kind of gave us the same figure again. I really would have liked to have seen a newly sculpted T-Rex, but it is what it is. All of the figures outside of that one T-Rex, though, are really impressive, and I think that Mattel made the right choice when it came to giving us new versions of the older figures, because they released the minis so many times previously that they really drove that line into the ground. So it is nice to see a completely new take on it, aside from one, and a really nice big breath of fresh air sent right back into the line. And again, the minis all look great as far as the sculpts go. They look great as far as the paint goes. I really like the new rubbery feel of them. And I absolutely love how many new species we have now entering the line, like the Gallimimus, the Iguanodon, the Therizenosaurus, the Pyroraptor, the Yangshuanasaurus, the Lystrasaurus, the Quetzalcoatlus. Like, there's a lot of really cool new species. Of course, the Giganotosaurus entering this line, and definitely, again, as a whole, I recommend not just picking up some of them, I really recommend picking up the entire line. Definitely worth purchasing. And for all of these, the entire wave, it's like, I think right around $38, $39. So it's really not that bad to get all of these figures. Whereas normally, like prior to this, when you would want to complete an entire wave of these minis, it would be pretty expensive because you had to buy every one individually. Whereas now we get like 2-packs and stuff, which is really awesome. So if you are interested in these, make sure you check your local Walmart or Target and purchase them there, because they should be available now in both stores. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.